As one person said, to know your future, you must know the past. The Learning Journey in association with Ross Audio presents Did You Know? And this week our topic will focus on why is it the study and writing of African history is problematic. For our disclaimer, the information sourced here is based on cross-referencing of literature and academic sources. Hence, the accounts and artifacts presented is connected to dominant discourses and thoughts. Please listen carefully and make your own conclusions. All sources will be listed on my YouTube channel. African history is often told from a Eurocentric point of view. There are numerous reasons why historians and other scholars find the study of African history problematic. European colonization and imperialism in Africa began in the 15th century, creating a distorted impression of the continent and its people among Europeans. With little or no interest in Africa as a whole, Europeans instead study only sections of Africa that they directly exploited for trade or served as their new territories for colonization. This meant that most information about Africa that we see today is often written with, of course, ulterior motives of portraying Africans as uncivilized, heathens, and so they can justify their exploitations, policies, and possible actions. For those reasons and other reasons, the study of African history has been subjected to criticism, especially among scholars who recognize the need to understand the past with accuracy, balance, and objectivity. As one professor puts it, there are three dominant problems in studying African history. The first is the vastness of the subject. Of course, African history is huge. In addition, African history is complicated. Even with research, you could end up reproducing the work of the Europeans, of course, based on what they wrote and the availability of materials. The second reason is that the study of African history is made complicated by the dominance of oral history. I am not saying that there were no written records. However, we must understand that some of these records were stolen, lost, or destroyed. The third is connected to the second reason. It is the European conquest of Africa. The professor suggests that after destroying documents in Africa, Europeans denied doing so. They denied destroying the artifacts. Well, all we need to do is look at the European museums and you will find elements of Africa's knowledge there. With the conquest of Africa came the denial of greatness and the accomplishments of Africa. I like the scholar's work a lot. He highlights in his work the origins of East Africa and other regions. Now let us continue. Throughout most of its history, much of the world outside of Europe was ignored or misunderstood. Before the rise of modern states in Europe, there was little culture or political unity among the people who lived in Europe. As a result, Europeans often developed their own view of the world by looking at other European countries as examples of what is to be normal or desirable. In the 19th century, many Europeans began to travel and colonize other parts of the world. They brought with them their views on what civilization meant. This meant that Europeans saw differences between themselves and other people and sought to explain it in ways that justify their dominance and their control over other people. But this perspective is far from reality, because when Europe was in its darkest days, Africa had Mansa Musa and other rulers. Mansa Musa is known as one of the wealthiest men to ever walk this planet. The truth be told, the continent of Africa experienced levels of productivity, wealth, excellence before its demise. And let me say I have more on Mansa Musa on my YouTube channel. Because there are so many issues that make the study of African history problematic, scholars have joined up with experts in studying it. The field of African history is growing and gaining attention as many people become interested in understanding it. The need to study African history is particularly important now. Many African countries are increasingly making their history more available to the public. And universities are creating new programs to teach students about African history and other subjects related to Africa. We must continue to educate. We must continue to ensure that the history is transitioned to the next generation. Finally, let me leave you with 2 questions. Do you know the history of your ancestors? Is your ancestors' history important for your future? I will leave it right here. Over to you, Rossi.